Morning, everyone. Thank you again for joining us. My name is Ron Halber, and I'm the Executive Director of Jewish Community Relations Council. I am pleased to introduce you to County Executive Candidate David Blair, for candidates for office. But we believe that these meetings are absolutely critical to fulfilling our mission to educate the Jewish community and promote civic participation. As the Jewish community's chief government and community relations arm, agency, the JCRC understands the importance of advocating for issues and funding that address our needs and also that are critical to the entire region's well-being. We represent over 100 synagogues, day schools, and social service agencies. In addition to government relations, the JCRC is focused on promoting social justice, intergroup relations, combating anti-Semitism and all forms of hatred, and supporting the state of Israel. And while I have folks on the phone, I would just like to point out the attendance of Bobby Schulman, who is our government relations co-chair, who so leads us in our government relations efforts so well. Thank you so much, Bobby. Now let me introduce our guest, David Blair, who was born and raised in Montgomery County. He's an entrepreneur and a philanthropist, active in business, civic, and nonprofit communities for decades, devoted to helping Montgomery County thrive. You may remember he lost the last race for county executive, I think it was 77 votes, David.
Yeah, thanks, Ron, for reminding me.
We just wanted to remind you, 77, David. 70, I'm kidding, I don't want to tease you. David is an entrepreneur. We already said that. He is the founder of the Council for Advocacy and Policy Solutions, which is a public policy and advocacy institute. CAPS has created many initiatives partnering with the county to launch the Food for Montgomery County, establishing a telehealth program to reach out to underserved communities in collaboration with the American Health program, which I'd love to hear more about, since telemedicine is becoming such a big deal today, and launching an entrepreneurship lab at the University of Shady Grove, and working with the Black and Brown Coalition to promote equitable access to resources to close the achievement gap. By the way, you should know that during the pandemic, the JCRC was very active with the Black and Brown Coalition in establishing hubs for learning to make sure that children that didn't have access to the internet and to food and instruction that was available to them. We're very proud of our engagement with that. David also founded Catalyst Health Solutions, a healthcare services company that manages prescription drug benefits. He serves as a board member and advisor to several nonprofits, including the Bipartisan Policy Center, the Partnership for a Healthy America, the Universities of Shady Grove, and the Montgomery County Chamber of Commerce. David, it is a pleasure and honor to welcome you here. And I, of course, will start off by asking you the first question. Why are you running for county executive?
Well, Ron, thank you for the thoughtful introduction, and good morning, everyone. Really pleased to be here. Ron, if I could start just by, I want to just acknowledge what happened over the weekend, this horrific shooting in Buffalo. These murders were carried out by an 18-year-old white supremacist. And unfortunately, this dreadful act is something that the Jewish community is all too familiar with. I was reminded of the tragedy at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh a couple of years ago, and then more recently, the hostage situation in Texas. So I just want to express my gratitude to your organization, the JCRC, for pushing the county executive on the grant funding. And I'm thankful for former county executive Mike Leggett and the entire political leadership for backing that. I see public safety really as the county executive's job one, and protecting our faith communities is an incredibly important component of that public safety. And it appears to be an increasing danger to the Jewish community. And so as we've talked about this before, Ron, I will continue to not only support, but expand our county security grant programs, including its focus on operating funds, as opposed to just capital funds for our Jewish faith institutions, so that you can hire off-duty police officers to protect your residents. So I will go ahead and start by just wanting to acknowledge that. Clearly, our thoughts and prayers are with those families in Buffalo this morning. So as Ron mentioned, I'm a lifelong Montgomery County resident. I went to school here. My wife and I are raising our family here. Quite simply, it's home. And there's no doubt that I was blessed to grow up here, right? With our great schools, the wide open spaces, what I call the welcoming and inclusive nature of Montgomery County. My mom was a public school teacher. And when I was a kid growing up, she would say, David, when a door opens up for you, it's your duty to reach back and pull the next person through. And I very much believe that those values align with Montgomery County. So as Ron mentioned, so my background was business. I started a healthcare technology company in Rockville, built that business up. We had tremendous success. I'm really harnessing the talent here in Montgomery County, built that up to a Fortune 500 company, sold that business 10 years ago. And for the past 10 years, my wife and I have been very much engaged in the nonprofit community in Montgomery County to move our community forward. Because with the perspective of having been here my entire life, I could just tell in my gut that we were slipping, that Montgomery County could be doing better. Whether it was our schools that used to be some of the best in the country. In fact, last year was the first year I can ever remember that we didn't have a single high school in the top 100 in the United States. So US News and World Report puts out a listing each year. Last year was the first year that we had no schools in the top 100. And in fact, perhaps even scarier is Montgomery County doesn't even have the best schools in the state of Maryland anymore. In fact, Howard County now has better public schools than Maryland. So our school system is slipping. Jobs, we're losing our jobs. Our jobs are moving to Virginia. If you drive to Dulles Airport, you can see them along the toll road there. And that's having a devastating impact on our tax base. And I won't bore you with too many numbers, but I'll share one with you. This is from the IRS. Over the past 10 years, we have a net tax migration of $5.2 billion. So said another way.
Can you say that again, David? How much a year over how long? Say that again.
Over 10 years, we've lost $5.2 billion.
That's so, cumulatively.
Yes. And so say another way, Ron, if you added up the W-2s that have moved out and subtracted the W-2s that have moved in, we have this huge $5 billion plus deficit. That's our tax base. And so it feels like it's more expensive to live here because we keep ratcheting up property taxes, energy taxes, you name it. It's because we're trying to offset that huge lost tax base that we see. So we're losing our jobs. Clearly, Montgomery County is an incredibly expensive place to live. And we're not building enough affordable housing. What's crazy about Montgomery County is we have great land, right? So we have so my metro has always been the Shady Grove Metro. There's a great parcel of land there. It's 35 acres. It's where you would build mixed income, mixed use housing, workforce housing, right? But we keep our school buses there. Think about how valuable that real estate is right next to a metro, and we decide that's where we're going to keep our school buses. So we have available land. And then of course we saw through the pandemic how it exacerbated all the inequities that were already right here in the county. Now, I say those challenges, and then I'm going to quickly pivot because I'm incredibly optimistic about our future. And while I'm from Montgomery County has actually attracted the best and brightest from around the country, and in fact, around the world, live right here. And whenever we have these meetings, whether they're Zoom like this or they're in person, I'm incredibly inspired by the ideas that come forth. So we have the talent, there's no doubt. We have the ideas to move this county forward. And I actually suggest we have the funding. We're still one of the richest counties in the country. And in fact, there's 3,100 counties in the United States. We're the 17th most richest. So top 1/10, 1%. So we have the ideas, the talent, the funding. What we're missing is executive leadership, right? And so that's the ability to get things done. I feel like that's where I spent my career, right? Is how we're able to build a Fortune 500 company right here in Montgomery County. And not only were we a Fortune 500 company, I'm most proud that we were one of Fortune's most admired healthcare companies. And so right here in Montgomery County. And of course, as an executive, and many of you know this, you can never be the smartest person in the room, right? Being an executive is about attracting talented people. It's about delegating. It's about setting ambitious goals. It's about removing obstacles. It's about getting things done. And here in Montgomery County, I think we often get in our own way. Like climate change is a great example. We've been talking about addressing climate change for a decade plus, and we don't do anything. We just write report after report. Meanwhile, Howard County announced last year they're going to have 50% of their county government's solar energy is going to be from solar in 2 years. Arlington started curbside composting. Baltimore County planted 11,000 trees. So I think that's why the Sierra Club endorsed me, is because they realize there's ideas out there that need execution. You can't just talk about things. But let me kind of, maybe I'll wrap up here and hit to the heart of your question, Ron, about why I'm running for Montgomery County executive. as I started, I said I was blessed to grow up in Montgomery County, right? It's a wonderful place, and no doubt that was because of sacrifices people made before me, right? That people were working hard to make Montgomery County a great place. And so this is very much my opportunity to pay it forward to the next generations, right? So that Montgomery County can be the great place that I experienced. And that's why I'm running for Montgomery County Executive. So Ryan, I'll stop there, and I'm open to your questions.
So I'm going to wait for people to, people start posting their questions right now. One of the things I'd like to ask you about is that you've mentioned in some of your campaign literature, the two themes that I've seen, unless you want to add to this, that I see you've been expressing the most concern about is economic development and affordable housing. And unless there's a third you want to add as well. And I wanted to give you an opportunity to comment on that. Do you think that during the pandemic, let me rephrase it this way. You said Montgomery County is the home of all this talent, energy, intelligence, wealth. What would be the first three things you would do when you became county executive to start promoting Montgomery County as a destination for economic development?
Yeah, so great. Yeah, yes, Ron. So jobs. It's crazy that we have less private sector jobs in Montgomery County today than we did 10 years ago. That we have actually less businesses. We're getting thumped by the surrounding jurisdictions. So
why are we getting thumped? Why?
Well, and it's interesting, Ron. When I started our company, I was just in Rockville, and I didn't have any perspective. But as we grew the business, we had offices in 30 different states. I quickly realized that Montgomery County was the most difficult place to do business, and I'm not exaggerating. And it wasn't one thing; it was everything. It was permits, inspections, regulations, taxes, transportation. It was incredibly difficult. So how are we going to get out of this mess? So one of the things we put a lot of effort. I put more effort into this economic development plan for Montgomery County than anything I've done over the last 10 years. I've met with literally hundreds of business executives, chambers, residents, workers, you name it. And so one thing that we've done is we put forth a Bill of Rights for businesses. So what are the things that businesses can expect while they're in Montgomery County? Because I hear this all the time from businesses where they won't open up another business in Montgomery County because it's just too difficult. And the challenge is the capital can easily move. So for example, I was with Dan Simons. He's the co-founder of a restaurant chain called Founding Farmers. And he's got, 4 or 5 restaurants in the area. And I asked Dan, I said, will you open up another restaurant in Montgomery County? He said, no. He goes, it's so much easier in Virginia or DC or Prince George's County. Why would I do it here? And then he said, even if I could get comfortable with your current county executive, I'm afraid what he's going to do next. And so it's like this anti-business culture. So we have this business Bill of Rights, and then we got to start promoting local businesses, right? So if we're all buying from each other, if there's a pride in Montgomery County, we all do better. And so like here's an easy one. Like we have 93,000 acre ag reserve, right? Why are public schools not buying from our ag reserve, right? Like how can we connect farmers to the school system? That's our biggest budget item. I'm oversimplifying it. There's a lot of complexities to that, but those are kind of bold ideas that I want to pursue. And then, Ron, if you go through the rest of that economic development plan, which I won't bore you with right now, but I want to be a mile deep in 7 areas, okay? And so some of the things that are obvious, because they're all leveraging what we have in place today in Montgomery County: life sciences, hospitality, entrepreneurship culture, arts and entertainment in Silver Spring. And so you can go through that, and we're going to leverage what we have here today.
Let me ask you, what can you do on the county level? Because a lot of economic development is also driven at the state level. And if you don't have a state partner to do it, so I'll give you an example. I have friends of mine who, when they want to go out and buy a suit, they want to go to Nordstrom's, they want to buy a nice suit. They run over to Tyson's, who's going to pay $50 less in taxes on their suit. And they're going to have a bigger than they are at Montgomery Mall. But that's really a state function. So what are the real powers you have on the local level to, besides installing a pride and economic in Montgomery County, so we can compete with Fairfax and DC? Because, if I want my children, who are now teens, to stay and live in this area, there's got to be opportunities for them, right? And I've got a 20-year-old and a 17-year-old and a 13-year-old. So I want my 20-year-old, when he finishes college, to want to settle with his family and stay here, so I'm within distance of, God willing, future grandchildren. Although I feel I'm too young to think about that yet. But the reality is, where are these jobs? I mean, and also college is not meant for every person. Not every person. So how do we help a lot of kids? A lot of kids who go to Montgomery College. How do we make these kids? What things? So the question is, what can you do on the local level for economic development, and what kind of opportunities can we produce for a lot of people who don't want to go to college, but yet we want to have solid middle class careers, and we want to be able to keep them in this county.
Right. So Ron, I think you picked up on that kind of the sales tax issue, which is definitely a state issue.
It's devastating for us.
Yeah, but everything else is local. So and it's so simple. Like when I was running our company, I would get solicited by other jurisdictions all the time. Like you felt loved. Like they would call you up. I remember going to Des Moines, Iowa, and we were opening up a call center there. And the economic development folks picked me up at the airport. They bought me a nice steak dinner. They gave me their cell phone number. The next morning, they picked me up at the hotel. They showed me around. For office space. We went to the colleges, we met with the professors. Like they really wanted me. And there was a life science company that recently moved to Frederick. And I reached out to the county exec or the executive of this company. He said, no one ever called me. Nobody ever cared about me. So there's very much relationships matter, and they're really important. And so I am already leveraging those relationships to drive business here. And I can quickly pivot to the second part of your question, Ron, about college is not meant for everybody. I believe it's a moral imperative that 100% of our kids, when they graduate from high school, they're either ready to go to college or we've trained them in a career. Like, so, but so many, we have it. It's crazy. So this spring, 12,000 Montgomery County Public School students will finish their senior year. 3,000 will not be able to pass their college entrance exams, nor have we trained them in a career. Right, so 3,000 kids we've basically had for 18 years. We're now saying, so we prepared you for a minimum wage job. And there are some phenomenal career opportunities out there that we need to be pursuing. Like here's an easy one. Auto tech. We have this great auto tech program at Montgomery College. It trains kids I should say young men and women, to fix cars. And these are technical computer jobs. This isn't like changing oil anymore. They'll pay $50,000, $60,000 a year when the kids get out of 2 years. We only have 40 young men and women in the entire program. We have 700,000 cars in Montgomery County. We're training 40 to be mechanics. And so I think the county executive's role here can be connecting the dots between early childhood education, MCPS, Montgomery College, University of Shady Grove, and then actual careers, right? Because right now they all operate in these silos. And I think the county executive can connect those dots so that when we graduate students, if they don't want to go to college, we've trained them for 2 years. So they don't need to wait till they graduate high school to start training for a career, because those jobs do exist.
Let me ask you, I'm waiting for some more questions to go. Folks, if you're going to ask some questions, please ask specific questions, so we can hit on some real policy issues. If you compare Montgomery County to any major urban area, you would find out that and this has been true of every administration, that we don't make up that our agencies do not, and I mean all nonprofit agencies, do not get for the most part, a significant share of their operating budget from the county. And as a county that supposedly cares and wants to do best for the significant number of people who we have, the students who are on free and reduced meals, the need for mental health, I think we fall short as a county. Okay, I think we really, really fall short. And I've been lobbying in this area for 20 years. And the unwritten rule is, if you want operating money to build your institution, you go to the state, because it's very hard to get operating money in the state budget. We do get some, we've been successful, but if you really want to go, if you need operating money, you go to the county. I'll give you an example. The Jewish Social Service Agency, which is probably, I think Susie agreed with me, probably the largest provider, or the largest one or two providers of mental health services in Montgomery County. They accept Medicaid, unlike a lot of other providers do for mental health. They get 1% of their budget from the county. Now, you go to New York, you go to LA, and I know you can talk about urban areas with large base, but I think we could be doing better. And I don't think that, So my question is that how are we going to be a county what everybody says, every elected official says, a place to live, work, and raise a family, if we don't take care, if we're not available to take care of those in our community who are struggling? And what can you do as county executive to help nonprofits in general with operating money to meet their mission?
So I thank you, Ron, and I am committed to strengthening the partnerships between the county government and the nonprofits. I absolutely believe that as our nonprofit community, they have their finger on the pulse of what's going on, and the nonprofits can much quickly respond to those needs. We saw it through the pandemic, right? Where, whether it was food or testing supplies or baby supplies or the vaccinations. So, and having sat on numerous nonprofits, I've often felt the same frustration that you just described. And so the things that I'm committed to are long-term grants, right? The idea of one-year grants, I mean, they're oftentimes, we've been working with organizations for decades. So 3-year, 5-year grants, they have to have escalators in them, right? Because we want to pay people, we need to increase salaries every single year, just like they do in the for-profit world. I think we need to give our nonprofits more flexibility. Sometimes I see these grants and they're so specifically written that we're hamstringing the nonprofits that can't get out. Overhead, you mentioned. So we've got to be able to give the nonprofits, recognize that they have an overhead percentage, that 100% of the grant can't go to something because you actually need someone to provide the administration services, right? And so there needs to be an allocation for overhead. So I'd love to give our nonprofits, if I could summarize, more visibility into the out years, and certainly more flexibility to do with those funds. And so those are how I think about strengthening those partnerships with the nonprofit community, because I think they do a better job than government does.
So let me ask this question from Marla Schulman, who is a longtime business owner, a very successful business owner in our community in the translation service business, and also shares our interfaith work and does a fabulous job. She said, David, you opened by talking about security, and I can tell you the Jewish community obviously cares a great deal about that. And as we can talk more about that later. If Montgomery County's faith organizations were come together to cooperate around the area of security, do you think that there's a role that the county can play in supporting such a coalition? Marla,
I love that. I love that idea. So
I'm telling you, you got to bring Marla into your cabinet. She's amazing.
Okay. Yeah. So this is how I get the most energy from being out kind of on the campaign trail, if you will, because you hear these ideas about how that we hadn't thought about. So Marilyn, that's a fabulous idea. I would love to explore that, how we could have that kind of coalition and partner with the county to bring those additional security resources to our community. Great idea. Thank you.
So let me give you an example. So, if you think about right now, it costs about $65 to $85 an hour to hire an off-duty police officer. Okay. You've got about 54 Jewish buildings in Montgomery County, including synagogues and schools. Okay. Now, if you think about the amount of hours that they're open, including holidays, you can imagine how much money. It's about millions of dollars worth of security. For some of the bigger congregations, it's not that hard, but for the vast majority of congregations, it is hard right now. And I will give the county executive credit. He established the program and he's expanding it, but right now it's at $800,000. But in my quick estimate on a napkin, this program has to go up to $2 to $3 million easily, because it's not, even though when we did this in coalition, we created this program. We worked to create it. Not only was it, we're concerned about the security of our Muslim neighbors, we're concerned about the security of our African American neighbors, we're concerned about the rise in hatred towards Asian Americans. And I guess my question is that is going a different way right now, which is we don't even have enough police officers right now on our own police department, and yet we want to hire them to do more off-duty work. And right now, I know from having spoken to lots of police officers, morale is really low. 75% of them are eligible for retirement, and we can't even fill our academy class. I think we had room for 40, and we only have 13 recruits. So what's going on, David? How are we gonna, how do you achieve while crime is escalating? how do you hire more cops and at the same time make sure that police are acting properly towards minorities, and we don't have that sort of we don't have those pictures that we see, unfortunately, that we've seen in Montgomery County. How do you balance the need for more security and more police, and at the same time making sure that minority communities aren't afraid of the people who are sworn to protect them?
Right. So I believe that everyone in Montgomery County should feel both safe and respected. And Ron, I've actually been traveling to our police stations and going to the roll calls and meeting with the police officers to kind of get a better understanding. And it's fascinating to meet with the police officers, and there's usually, I'll say 30 to 50 in a group. And they're literally looking at their shoes, like literally looking like they're so demoralized. And you hear comments like, why should I pull somebody over when someone's going to take a video and I could get accused of being, racist. And then, but the most important thing that comes up is they say, my county executive doesn't have my back. I'm tired of being a political football with the county council. And so I am firmly committed to supporting all good police officers, right? And so we have to recognize that the police officers are part of our community. And on the same hand, there's room for improvement. There's room for improvement. And we're fortunate that we have Chief Marcus Jones. He's actually a national leader in things like community policing, de-escalation training. So we have the right person at the head, and we need to fully support him to put in these programs, because otherwise, I mean, you nailed it, Ron. People are leaving, people are retiring early or resigning, and we can't get new recruits. We're in a heap of trouble. And the reason that I've been going to the police stations now, I didn't 4 years ago when I ran, because it wasn't I didn't feel like it was a problem. And I tell them when I meet with them, I said, my agenda here today is to ask you not to resign or retire early, to stick around. I'm going to win, and then we're going to move this county forward all together, right? And so it's a big problem. But then I also want to talk about the thing that you said about the $800,000 that we spend versus we need $2 or $3 million, which is, we have a $6 billion budget. And I've gone through it from soup to nuts, have it spread over a conference room table. If the group of us here were starting a county from scratch with $6 billion, and you think how to prioritize your money, I don't know if this would be the number one thing, but it would certainly be like the 1, 2, or 3 things, right? That you say, okay, let's make sure we're going to put our money here. And so there's unfortunately, when you go through the budget, we have so many pet projects and pilots, inefficiencies that need to be cleaned up so that we can fully fund the priorities like keeping our Jewish community safe.
Where are some of those misaligned priorities? You're saying if you had the budget spread over on a table, I'm wondering, like, where do you see the disconnect between money being spent and priorities? Like, where are some, if you only have $6 billion, okay, I'm not giving you any more money, and you have the same budget you did last year, how do you, I mean, everybody has to work within the revenue. I mean, if we go into a recession, then all, God forbid, then all of your promises, whether you or Mark or Hans wins, you're going to have to make changes. You're just not going to have the revenue. I mean, you can't make promises on revenue you don't have. So I'm just wondering, like, by looking at the budget right now, like, where do you see a misalignment between money being spent and county priorities?
Well, there's small things like just proper inventory controls. Like, the accounting office reported last year that we'd spent money on laptop computers when we had a warehouse full of laptop computers. We routinely spend we're so short-sighted, we'll put in a hiring freeze, can't hire anybody. And then if anybody's been in business, and when you do that to an executive or a team, they immediately hire temporary staff, or people go into overtime, and that's more expensive than just hiring people. And then there's big things. So we spend, one of the things I love about Montgomery County is we spend $350 million a year on healthcare in Montgomery County. And there's no federal or state mandate for us to spend that kind of money on healthcare. We do it because of that welcoming and inclusive nature, right? Because we love being in Montgomery County. And if you go to these clinics, and I know that you're very familiar with them, they're phenomenal, right? But we're not doing an effective job of getting third-party reimbursement. And so every major Democratic candidate for governor, I've sat down with on this very subject. I said, so these dollars really should be coming from state Medicaid, or perhaps it's Medicare through federal. And there's a possibility that it's through a commercial insurer. But these are hundreds of millions of dollars of savings that we're not capturing. And so what we've got to make sure that we're getting all of that money that we can to fund the types of things that we're describing today.
So we got a really interesting question from Rebecca Hertzman, who said, how will you address food insecurity for lower incomes and children? And I would add to that that really became apparent during the pandemic. When we saw how many, I mean, the idea that we had to open up, that so many children get their only healthy meal in a rich county like ours, or breakfast or lunch from the school system. And even if schools were closed, we had to open up places where people can get food. Just seems, like, this is not, we're not some third world country where food should be an issue. I mean, everybody, I think on this phone call would agree, you should be able to eat. Eating shouldn't be an issue, and yet it's an issue. And in my opinion, that is a moral stain on this county, that people have a problem doing something simple as eating, or feel they have to go to outside their own home. What kind of creative solutions can we do to address address food insecurity for lower income and families and children, as Rebecca has asked?
So, I've seen this firsthand, right? I'm sure many have too, where you're in that food distribution line and you're putting the boxes in the trunk or the back seat, and then you start mentally counting how many cars are in the line, how many boxes of food do I have? We're going to run out of food before we run out of cars. You see the kids in the back seat, their eyes are as big as silver dollars, and so we have a huge problem with food insecurity. And I want to really challenge this county to move to more longer term sustainable solutions. Because what I saw through the pandemic was there wasn't enough money, there wasn't enough food. We couldn't satisfy it. And so we're not going to rip the rug out from underneath the phenomenal programs that exist today. But I really want to move to creating jobs and opportunities for so many of these people. And as I mentioned, Ron, you asked me about kind of the trades, and not everyone wants to go to college. It's crazy how we have all these wonderful jobs out there. When as county executive or candidate, I see all these jobs out there, and they're not just trades. Or like, I was with Adventist Healthcare. They need 600 nurses in the next 2 years. And these aren't 4-year degrees. The Terry Ford was like, I can start these off with like 1 or 2 years of community college training, get them into a lab technician role, and then move them up once they get into the hospital system. We have great jobs here. And then when I'm with the nonprofit community, they're like, David, there's no jobs. There's no good paying jobs. And so I think that's the role the county executive can play. We need to move the folks that are, 2 or 3 minimum wage jobs, barely, paying rent or a car payment. They're the ones that are standing in these food lines. Well, how are we going to do that? Right? How does someone take a year off from their life to get trained to be a lab technician when they can barely make ends meet? And that's what we need to be really creative. So one model is the apprenticeship model. And I've been talking to a lot of CEOs about apprenticeship models where someone gets paid a living wage and they're being trained, right? So I met with a recent person who's in an HVAC trade group. He goes to class 2 days a week. He works 3 days a week. He'll make $36 an hour in 3 years after he gets through this program. So we've got to do that. But the other one is I'm inspired by my 19-year-old daughter right now, who's taking a gap year, right? And I want to take a gap year one eventually too. But how, do we need to give some of these moms and dads that are killing themselves a gap year so they can actually get a training, right? Can we pay them a living wage? So we say, okay, take the next year off and you're going to get trained to be the HVAC, lab technician, whatever it might be, so that we can move them from this endless string of poverty into something that's sustainable. Because we know in our hearts, we know they do not want to be in that line waiting for that box of food. They don't.
David, let me interrupt you for a second.
Sure.
I'm trying to forget what the hospital is in Kent Mill that our Jewish community was supporting. If anybody remembers, we had something established called the Jewish Neighbors Association, which was Daphne Holy Cross, thank you, Daphne Lazar Price, Fran Kritz, and several other members in the Orthodox Jewish community. They found out that there was like 80 or 100, I don't remember the exact number, 80 or 100 people who were working at Holy Cross, like literally who had jobs, and still during the pandemic, because they didn't have time to go shopping, the Jewish community was feeding These are people who are making, who are getting more than a living wage. $50,000 in Montgomery County gets you nowhere it gets you nowhere. And I mean, you know, we have to realize, I mean, you need probably $150,000 a year combined family income to have a decent standard of living here, unless we're going to produce more housing that is not going to cost a third of people's budget. So, you know, where I'm trying to get to is like, what are long-term solutions to this? I mean, the cost of living in Montgomery County is absolutely insane. And the jobs that we're talking about could produce good wages, but if they're being eaten up by the cost of housing, which is becoming 50 to 60% of somebody's budget, how do we recalibrate that balance so that two people making $50,000 a year coming home to 100,000, sending their kids to a good school, can also go ahead and keep some of their income after and not have to pay a $4,000 mortgage to live in a townhouse?
You hit it. You hit it, Ron. Housing, right? So we have blocked new housing development, right? And so I mentioned Shady Grove in my opening remarks, but we have, whether it's White Flint or Glenmont, Forest Glen, like we have areas near public transit that could support workforce housing, right? And so we need to start in that with the whole new Purple Line corridor coming up, right? So we've got, maybe, Ron, I would say it this way: we've got to attack this problem from both directions. We need to make Montgomery County more affordable by investing in more affordable housing, and we need to start increasing wages, because to your point, nobody can live in this county off of $50,000 a year.
Let me ask you, is there one, I'm opening up, trying to asking people for more questions. Is there one, let's say you were to serve 4 years as county executive, and then you decide to run again. You're sitting back at the end of your first term as county executive, and you want to look back and you're getting ready to run for re-election, right? What are the three accomplishments you want to be able to brag about by the end of your first 4 year term? What are the things you want to be able to say, I got this done, I got this done, and I got this done, and because of that, Montgomery County is a better place to live, work, and raise a family?
Well, so I think the couple things come up for me right away. One is we got to get our schools back on track, because it really drives so much. People move to Montgomery County because of our schools. People stay in Montgomery County because of our schools. It's helped. When I used to recruit folks to join our company, and I would say, hey, I'd make the offer, and let's say they're moving from Dallas or something. Inevitably, a week later, they'd call me up and they'd say, we just looked at your school system. Your public schools are better than our private schools. Like, we're so excited to move. So we've got to get our schools back on track. And that starts with the very young. And there's programs out there for the 0 to 3 year olds that we can help support moms and dads. We need to have high quality K for all. So getting our schools on track. The economy, Ron, like, we've got to have a flourishing, growing economy. It is crazy that with this entrepreneurial spirit that we have here in Montgomery County, that we are lagging the region in new business growth. So getting our the economy going, and then certainly I think crime. I mean, that's one of the things that's really scary to so many of us, is how we've seen crime go up over the past 12, 18 months, and being much more aligned with our public safety, so that everyone in Montgomery County feels both safe and, to your earlier point, respect.
Marla asked another really good question. Isn't a key obstacle of the attitude of the haves in this county against affordable housing is the lack of understanding that we're in this together? That, a condescending attitude of some people who said, I don't want affordable housing in my neighborhood because it's going to lower my property. But how do you change attitudes in Montgomery County so that people welcome affordable housing, as opposed to looking upon it as going to diminish their own property values? Or, let's face it, for most people, the biggest investment they make is in their house. Okay. And when they retire and they either decide to hopefully stay in the county or they downsize, that's where they've made their money. Through that appreciation. And people, I think, incorrectly, and in my own opinion, personal opinion, condescendingly look at affordable housing as hurting, quote, their way of life. And that's not a very progressive attitude about about trying to reach out to our neighbors. Because if we, in my opinion, JCRC is not just about helping ourselves. There's a famous idiom, a famous expression that we talk about in our text that says, you are not free to separate yourself from the community, meaning, of course, we have to look out for the benefit of the Jewish community, but we ourselves belong to a larger community as well that we have to work for the benefit for. And part of that benefit is making sure that people have decent housing.
Yes. So I think the word that comes up to answer that question is leadership. And so unfortunately, there's a very small minority group in Montgomery County that has a disproportionately loud voice, and they've been successful in stopping projects. And I think leadership is describing the greater good, not acting with fear, like, oh, I'm not going to be able to do this, and getting it done. Because the benefits of the mixed income, mixed use is phenomenal. And Ron, I love that saying, about communities, like you can't separate yourself from the community. That's so true. And we see the data. We know that when low income families and, middle class families send their kids to the same school, they all do better. They all do better. Property values go up. And it's also these new areas that we're going to develop. It's where new businesses want to start, right? It's where I have a 25-year-old son. It's where he would want to live, right? And he recently moved to Arlington, and he said, Dad, me and my roommate, we can save $300 a month. We have a new washer and dryer in our apartment. Like it's a new unit. And he was off a Battery Lane in Bethesda, and it was this dilapidated building. And I was like, it's hard to argue with them because there's no new housing here. And so we've got to start creating that kind of housing here. So not just young folks like 25-year-olds, but whether it's seniors, whether it's workforce housing, new families can afford to live here so that they can also work here.
Marilyn and Michael Greenland have a really interesting question, and they said the percentage of seniors in the county continues to increase. What new programs or expanded services can you offer, or would you like to offer seniors?
Okay, so thank you, Marilyn and Michael. So we cannot lose our seniors. The seniors are a critical part of Montgomery County. So whether it's because they support the local economy, they pay taxes, many of them volunteer or work part-time, but most importantly, it's like our parents and our grandparents, right? It's family, and that's the community that we need. And so we've got to do everything that we can to support them. So one of the things we have something called a senior fellowship program, which is aligning seniors with volunteer opportunities. I would expand that, making sure that our community libraries, senior centers are open for that. We can do a much better job helping them with transportation solutions. It's a big issue for seniors. And across the country, organizations or counties are adopting really like point-to-point transportation solutions. In Montgomery County, we're buying ride-on buses like it's 1999. Like we still buy the big buses. It's incredibly inefficient. People don't use them. The world has changed. And so we need better transportation solutions. I'd say we can't raise property taxes anymore. Our seniors they have a fixed income. We can't control inflation. I mean, inflation in the past year has gone through the roof. So we got to hold the line on property taxes. And then a big thing that I'm passionate about are prescription drug costs, which eat up a disproportionate amount of a senior's income. And there are programs out there that we can utilize to help seniors with prescription drug costs. It's something I worked with the AARP on. And it was something that I would bring to Montgomery County to help make it more affordable for our seniors.
David, my friend Stephen Shapiro, who I've had the pleasure of traveling to Israel with, said, Elrich did not coordinate the county's COVID response with the governor's office. What would you do differently if we were faced with another COVID outbreak?
So Stephen, you hit the nail on the head. I would say, so collaboration is a huge thing. And many of you saw the food fight that our county executive got in with the governor over independent schools reopening and other things. That's incredibly unsettling. And so for me, there needs to be a level of collaboration, not just with the governor, but with the surrounding jurisdictions. It made no sense. I mean, it was like literally in 1 week, Montgomery County was lifting their mask mandate, DC was imposing it, or vice versa. So we need to take a regional approach to this. Those conversations with the governor would happen behind the scenes, right? And we would hash it out. And then we would both stand in front of a podium and say, this is how we decided we're going to move forward. And in fact, I would take that a step forward and say, each week I would have had a press conference with the superintendent of schools, our health officer, the president of the county council. So there'd be one message, complete transparency to the community at a time. Because as a resident, it was so unsettling when we were getting mixed information from mixed sources. We never knew which way was up. And I think in a crisis, you clearly need to over communicate.
So there's a question from a person who chooses to remain anonymous to me and said, so you mentioned that seniors need better transportation. What is it?
Oh, so thank you. So one, the easiest thing to do right now would be to fix our ride-on bus system. So it's the ridership is down 25% over the last 10 years. This is pre-pandemic. Okay, it dropped 25%. Then it fell off a cliff after when the pandemic hit. And so we need a better technology, better routes. I'd make it free all the time. So we got to fix ride-on bus. That'd be day one. But day two is I started investing in these. They're like 10-seat passenger vans, and they go point to point. So if a senior needs to go visit a family member or go shopping or a doctor's appointment, they can pick them up much closer to where they live and then get them to their actual destination. It's much more similar to like a Lyft or an Uber type of transportation solution than the ride-on bus. And the big difference for us is that when you see one of those ride-on buses, the cheap ones cost $500,000, the expensive ones cost $1 million. So they're incredibly expensive to buy and operate. And we could be much more nimble with a smaller fleet. That is actually what people want. And this isn't cutting edge technology. They've been doing this in other cities for 5-10 years now. And that's the type of solution that I would bring to Montgomery County.
So there was an article in the Washington Post on Friday that addressed you and some of your activities and what you've been up to lately. And I don't know if you wanted to respond to any of the things that what the article mentioned.
So thank you, Ryan. So it's interesting. It's a challenge to get coverage on our race. We no longer have the Gazette, and so people don't cover our race. So in one respect, we're always thankful when we get coverage, but unfortunately, they don't have the time to kind of do a deep dive into the work that we've done. And the article really described some of the work that my wife and I's foundation has done, our advocacy group has done, and it certainly didn't cover all the great things that we did. Whether it was around food insecurity. I'm so proud. It was a question that came up earlier. My wife and I led an initiative. We raised $1 million of private money. The county matched that with a $10 million grant. It's called Food for Montgomery. They failed to mention that, as well as some other things that we did to move this county forward. But clearly, I'm committed to making this community a better place because, as you said, Ron, it's all connected. And I was doing that outside of the public sector, and then hopefully in the next several months I'll be elected, and then I'll be able to move the county forward from within government.
Our final question before I give you a chance to wrap up is from Gilbert Eisner, who said, "Why are our schools failing, and what can we do to correct this?" Well, I don't know. I don't know if failing. I don't know if I would say failing. I mean, that's Gilbert's thing. Maybe I may. That's his question. I would ask it in a different way. What can we do to make them do better? Because I still think we have a class education system in the county, but clearly they're not doing as well as they could be when we're losing ground to Howard and we're losing ground to Fairfax and we're losing ground to others. So what do we got to do, David?
Well, I mean, so let me not minimize it. So it's a more challenging environment. We have more low income families. We have more children on free and reduced meals. We have more children where English is a second language. So it's definitely more challenging. But there are programs that are in place that they do, again, around the country. Actually, we used to do it in Montgomery County. I was actually talking to a former superintendent, Dr. Jerry Weiss. And you've got to get to these moms and dads very early, right when the baby's born. In fact, Dr. Jerry Weiss, they knew where low-income moms were having their babies. And before the mom would leave the hospital, they were giving the mom books, information on brain development, nutrition, why it's important to read to your baby, the social services that were available. And so those are the type, and we no longer do that. So you've got to get to the moms and dads really early, because if that child gets to kindergarten and they're not ready to learn, they're always behind. They can never catch up, and it's tragic. So we've got to start very young. It's actually, I worked on a program in Durham, North Carolina, called Durham Connects, and it was really cool. It was a nurse met with a mom 3 times in that baby's first 18 months, just to make sure that that baby was tracking with brain development and breathing and nutrition. And so we've gotten away from that. We've got to start young with 0 to 3. We've got to have high quality pre-K so that when they enter kindergarten, they're ready to learn. And when I meet with principals, I'll hear often, David, these children that are entering kindergarten, they're not ready to learn in any language. So don't blame English as a second language on this. Like this is a much deeper problem. So we've got to start young. I think that would pay dividends. Clearly.
Actually, I lied. I said that was the final question. There's going to be one more question. With the possibility of Roe v. Wade being suspended, being overturned, and Montgomery County being one, I think it's either 17 states plus the Montgomery plus the DC, or 16 states plus DC, that will have more liberal laws where women can have reproductive access. We can expect that Montgomery County and other places are going to become a destination for women who are seeking reproductive health care. Will you, as county executive, open our facilities and do things to help these women if they unfortunately become trapped in states where they can't and don't have access to reproductive freedom? Will you make Montgomery County a safe place, destination where these women could get care?
So we have to do everything we can to protect women's health, women's choice, absolutely. And I don't know precisely what that means from a county government's perspective. What I've suggested is that we engage the community to find out what would be the best practices. And I don't know if that means we need to change funding, whether we need to change security, whether we need how we could think about healthcare access. Even our regulations or our laws might need to be changed. So this is obviously all happening very quickly, but I think there's no doubt that we have the community leaders that I would engage in a roundtable conversation to understand how we could best prioritize the county's resources to protect women's rights.
And I would also add right now, by the way, that a current county official, when we were backing the current county executive's effort to increase the nonprofit security program by $100,000, which we're glad he did, and the council, who's approved at the committee level, said Earl Stoddard noted that, something we may have to improve, we may need to increase this program more because we may have reproductive health facilities where women can obtain abortions being the target of violence or being targeted, and that we are going to need to expand the money so that these nonprofit facilities can ensure that women who come here, whether they're Maryland natives or whether they're people from other county, can come here for safe medical treatment and not be and have their facilities protected. So I would just like to throw that out there. So David, why don't you take a moment or two to summarize, and then I can thank you for spending an hour with us this morning on a very, very on a great conversation.
Well, thank you, Ron, and just a heartfelt thank you to all of you for joining the conversation this morning. So hopefully you gathered through my comments that Montgomery County is a great place, and there's no doubt that we can be doing better. I believe we need a fresh approach, a fresh perspective, really to harness the people and the ideas that we have here and to get things done and to move Montgomery County forward for all. And I think I bring that unique executive leadership to this race. And I would be grateful for your support. The election is on July 19th. Early voting starts July 7th. Thank you, Ron. Thank you all.
On that note, I would like to thank you, everybody, very much. We're reaching out to have we will be having other forums as we continue through through July 19th. And I appreciate this because, by the way, you should know that the JCRC is coming out with a candidate guide. So we're going to be producing a nonpartisan education guide. And here's what's very interesting, folks. Everything from governor all the way down to delegate. And we're not going to do the races where there is a contested primary, where there's no contested primary. So if there's a senator who's running on the Democratic side and has no opposition, we're not going to include them because that'd be a waste of space, because as soon as they get one vote, they win. We still have 104 candidates that we're waiting for responses from. So anybody who agrees to actually read our entire guide gets a free cup of coffee from me at Starbucks. So thank you very much. I really appreciate everybody. I hope you have a Shavua Tov, a wonderful week. David, thank you for devoting yourself to public service, to philanthropy, for your leadership. And I hope we will all see you again as we continue. We will be doing a Congressional 4 district where we'll be talking with Glenn Ivey, hopefully Donna Edwards and Angela Angel. Angel, I hope I said that right. Thank you, Susie, for about other races. We're hopefully going to have controller and attorney general. And I appreciate everybody here being willing to stick with us, remain engaged, and most important, go out and vote.
Yes.
Okay. Best wishes. You want to ask yourself.
You could have done.
somebody has noise coming from their background, please mute yourself. Who is that? Hold on. I don't want to embarrass anybody, but you've got to mute yourself, folks. Okay, sorry about that.